In the last video, I was talking about autopilot and how events from the past can influence our behaviours now, even if you're not aware of it. So what did that look like for me? Well, to understand my autopilot, we need to go back a bit. Okay, quite a bit. I'm the second oldest of 6 children, with 4 younger brothers and an older sister. But when I was 4, my brother John died. When I was 5, my brother Mark died. When I was 12, my 13-year-old sister Anne died. And when I was 22, my brother Shane died. I went from 5 siblings to just 1. My parents went from 6 children to just 2, me and my youngest brother Owen. Now, I don't know how other families would have dealt with such terrible losses, but our family, we just said nothing. We never spoke about it. Their names were never mentioned. And it was after my sister died when I was 12 that I unconsciously decided that I needed to be this perfect child. Before she died, I was happy, chatty, outgoing. And afterwards, I was quiet. I kept myself to myself. I always did what I was told and I never spoke back. I set myself very high standards at school. I always had to be first in the class. I never told anyone how I was feeling, and I rarely showed any emotions. And I got very good at it because I spent over 30 years suppressing any emotions that I'd felt and seeking perfection everywhere, even at the cost of living my life and my health. But all that seeking perfection had some rewards because I got promotion after promotion, and the more success I had at work, the more that became my identity. Working as I did in the construction industry, and I was used to working at top speed, meeting tight deadlines. No, everything seemed to be needed yesterday. Have you heard that expression, stop and smell the coffee? I didn't have time to smell the coffee, never mind stop. For me, it was just grab the coffee, keep on walking, or in my case, running to get to the next place. A typical day for me started at 5 a.m. so that I could be on the road and miss the rush hour traffic. Living on coffee during the morning and typically missing lunches, then staying late to continue working, or as I tried to tell myself, no, to miss the evening traffic. The earliest I was getting home was 8 p.m. And at that point, I didn't even want to think about cooking for myself. So dinner for me was typically toast, crisps, and as it was evening after all, a glass or two of wine. I was working a minimum of 70 hours a week, typically more, with even longer evenings and weekend work. But that was just everyday life for me. That was normal. And that's how I spent the last 8 years of my construction career. But the cost was high. I rarely saw my family and friends. My social life, mainly the TV. I missed out on so much. But one thing that really stands out was when I missed a trip of a lifetime. I put work first and missed out on the first leg of a planned road trip along the Alaskan Highway from Canada up to Anchorage and back. I changed our plans, and my partner drove that first leg on his own and picked me up in Anchorage for the drive back. Bad enough that I had missed that whole first half of that trip. But what I really missed out on was a spectacular view of the Northern Lights, something that had been on my bucket list for years. My partner had stood on a hill outside of Fairbanks watching and photographing that wonderful display. He said standing there and seeing the first glimmers of light appear in the dark sky, and then to be almost surrounded by the dancing colours as they spread across that clear night sky, brought tears to his eyes. Well, they certainly brought tears to mine, because that was the only time those lights appeared on that whole trip, and I was absolutely gutted. How many of you can relate to that? Have you got regrets for putting work ahead of your life? But as I said, it just seemed perfectly normal to me. And then I read this article. It asked, are you optimistic, disciplined, flexible, motivated, keen to learn, helpful, organised, seeks opportunities, likes a clutter-free environment? Oh, yes, I thought. That sounds like me. I can relate to that. Can you relate to any of those? Well, seemingly these are some of the characteristics of high achievers. Oh, well, didn't I feel smug? So I read on. I read some more about high achievers. They often suffer from perfectionism, imposter syndrome, self-doubt, a fear of failure. They sacrifice time with family and friends. They often don't socialise with colleagues, and they ignore their personal needs in order to get the job done. Yeah, well, I could also relate to those, but I certainly wasn't feeling as smug now. And why? Because those are some of the signs of stress and burnout. But like I said, it just seemed like everyday life to me. That was my normal. But like it said, it appears that I'm not alone. As Microsoft's Great Resignation survey showed, 54% of employees feel overworked and 39% feel exhausted. Now, I'm sure that most of us know that a little bit of stress is good for the body. It helps to motivate us. And it's a bit like a pressure cooker. Everything's fine while the pressure is kept at a certain point. But if it continues to increase and you aren't able to or don't know how to release that pressure, or maybe you don't even realise that it's increasing at all, then the whole thing can blow up. And that's when someone goes off with stress or burnout, goes to a competitor, leaves the industry, or checks out of life altogether. I left the industry. I needed the space to get myself together. And when I realised I was burnt out and looked back, it was only then that I finally saw the impact that it had on my life and the personal cost. And I know I'm not alone. And it's likely that those others are not the ones that come in at 9 and go home at 5. They're likely to be your top talent. Those driven people, those high achievers, just like I was. And that's when I realised I needed to share this message. Because the bottom line is, whether you think you have a responsibility to look after your employees' mental health and well-being, you will lose out if you do nothing or you do it in the wrong way. Because there is a business case here, and it's not just the financial cost. It's the knowledge that is also lost to your organisation. Now, a lot of you may be sitting there thinking, but Jackie, we already do mental health. We've got EAPs and we've got mental health first aiders. Well, that's just like waiting for that pressure cooker to blow. We're waiting for a crisis to happen before we do anything. And as we've already seen, that may just be too late.